Hello. Are we at the top of the hour yet? I think so. Once again, hello, everyone. It is the top of the hour, and we are going to get today's session started. Thank you so much for coming to Informal Weather Education Outreach. My name is Sarah Fisher, and I am the Community Engagement and Outreach Strategist for Region 2 of the Network of the National Library of Medicine, and I am the host for today's session. I just have a few informational items to cover before we get to the presentation. We have muted everyone to limit background noise, but we do welcome your questions and comments at all times. Please use the chat function to share comments. There's a Q&A function to submit any questions you may have for our speaker. We are lucky to have Molly Knapp and Erica Lake, who are providing production assistance today, and they will be keeping an eye on your posts. They will queue up your questions as they come in and save them for the speaker to address at the end of his presentation. As a reminder, by registering for this webinar, all attendees have agreed to abide by the NNLM Code of Conduct to foster a respectful and professional learning environment. Closed caption has been enabled and is available by clicking on the icon, which is at the bottom of your screen with the three dots, and select closed caption. We are recording today's presentation and will post on NNLM's YouTube channel in 1 to 2 weeks. And at that time, everyone who has registered for this session will receive an email from us with the link for the recording. Please keep your eyes peeled for that. Today's webinar is eligible for an Medical Library Association continuing education credit, which you'll be able to claim through the evaluation link that we share at the end of the session. And that evaluation is really important. Your feedback matters and helps us improve future trainings. So please take a moment to complete. And since some of you might be first-time attendees to one of our webinars, I'd like to share just a couple of words about who we are. The NLM, which is the National Library of Medicine, is one of the 27 institutes and offices of the National Institutes of Health. It is the world's largest biomedical library and produces online resources, some of my favorites also, like PubMed and Medline Plus. The NNLM is the network of the National Library of Medicine, which is the outreach program of the NLM and works to ensure health professionals and the public have equal access to health information. And the NNLM is also made up of 7 regional medical libraries, 3 national offices, and 4 national centers. We provide training, funding, and engagement opportunities. Now, today's session is part of the NNLM Virtual Disaster Preparedness Forum, which started September 12th. Today is the final speaker. And this forum has featured expert speakers presenting data tools, resources, disaster planning, communication, and so much more. We also are excited to highlight the collaboration with another NNLM program. In observance of National Preparedness Month, the NNLM Reading Club has selected these 3 books and has gathered information from trustworthy resources to help you take action and stay safe. More information is available on the NNLM Reading Club website, and we will drop that in the chat. There may be some other links in the chat as well. Check them out. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Erik Salna is a meteorologist and is currently the Associate Director of Education and Outreach for the Extreme Events Institute and the International Hurricane Research Center. These are both at Florida International University in Miami. Erik has over 25 years of experience as a broadcast meteorologist, providing live continuous coverage for hurricanes, tornadoes, and flooding. Erik was inducted into the Meteorologist Hall of Fame, in 2020, and in 2023, he was awarded the Lou Fincher Award by the National Tropical Weather Conference and nominated for Weather Person of the Year by the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes. He earned an MS in meteorology from Northern Illinois University and a BS in physical geography with an emphasis in meteorology from the University of Illinois. Go Illinoisans. Welcome, Erik. I have turned off my camera. I am turning the session over to you, but I do know that we are going to do a quick text switch. So bear with us for this quick moment.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to, as I said, going to cover a lot of different pieces of information and then look forward to your questions at the end of the presentation as well. So there'll be a variety of here as I point out things and share resources. So I know Sarah and Molly mentioned they've been in New Orleans recently. So we'll call it some meteorological gumbo coming your way right now. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. And Sarah, you can see that next slide all about FIU. Just wanted to confirm. Yep. All right, excellent. Well, I just wanted to just briefly share some information about Florida International University. If you weren't aware, we are located in Miami, and it's been a growing university in the last 20 years. It's been exploding in growth. We're certainly part of the 12-member state university system of Florida. We're a major minority institution with very diverse student body, predominantly Hispanic. We're an R1 research university. And because of our growth, we are the 8th largest public university by enrollment in the nation with over 55,000 students. And we continue to get great rankings from America's best colleges as we continue to grow and expand. So just wanted to share a little bit about the university itself. All right, here we go. We're showing an old picture here, and that's my old family picture. I grew up in the Chicago area, and I noticed in the chat there's at least one person from the Chicago area. It was a town of Mundelein where I grew up. And I show this picture. That's me. And as I like to tell everyone, I haven't changed a bit. So why am I showing that? Well, it's because of my interest in meteorology. And usually it starts when at a very young age, most meteorologists, so when they're in elementary school. And a big thing that happened to really trigger my interest was a lightning bolt hit a big tree just outside my window, which scared me to death. But as it turned out, that fear grew into a curiosity, which then spread to a passion to want to learn and understand, how did that lightning bolt get created? How do thunderstorms get created, and snowstorms and hurricanes and so on and so forth? So that passion carried into my schooling, and I became a meteorologist. It's been a blessing that I've been in my passion zone for my entire career life. And it certainly is a STEM career involving science, technology, engineering, and math. And now switching gears, a favorite song of mine. So why am I showing this? Well, as a kid growing up in the Chicago area, way back when, before cable, now you know how old I am. Well, one of the major networks would show The Wizard of Oz every spring. And that's the time of year when we would start to get severe weather in the Midwest as well. And of course, what really just fascinated me was the tornado in The Wizard of Oz and how realistic it was in the whole storyline around that twister. Then, of course, in later years came out another movie, the movie called Twister. And all the special effects involved in creating those tornadoes. So I just mentioned this as kind of a common interest thought, if you'd like. How did they create those tornadoes in both of those movies? How did Hollywood do it? Because technology was so much different in 1939 with The Wizard of Oz versus 1996 with the movie Twister. So it's a great topic to dive into and do the research and share with others. And it's a great talking point too. And obviously back in 1939, they had to use special effects with artists and painters. And so the tornado was a burlap sack. They used fans and those corn stalks and farm buildings were all little miniature models. And then switch gears to 1996, and it's now computer graphics and green screen. So it's a great fun story when you talk about how they've advanced in portraying weather in the movies. All right, from that, I did want to touch upon what happened this summer. Boy, it was a hot one, and we had a record-breaking heat wave this summer across many sections of the country. Many of you may have experienced that. I know down in New Orleans they did, and other cities as well, even here in South Florida, in Miami. And you probably heard on the local weathercasts, there was this incredible heat dome that just sat there and didn't go anywhere for days and days and weeks and weeks. And it was an area of high pressure that was locked and just provided for this whole setup of extreme heat. And for all the major cities under that heat dome, you also have what's called the urban heat island effect, which just made it even worse in the large metropolitan areas. So our local office of the National Weather Service, and probably you saw it in your areas too, we're then coming out with excessive heat warnings and heat advisories, and coming out with all these health and safety tips to stay cool in the heat. A lot of it common sense. And many of you probably know, of course, who is most vulnerable to the heat. And that really became front and center this past summer. Certainly seniors, people with chronic health conditions, people working outdoors, pets, and then the talk of cooling centers opening up in certain communities, and possibly your library, or of libraries that had opened up to be a community cooling center as well. All right, let's go to the U.S. Weather Scoreboard. And when we look at weather hazards, rip currents, waterspouts, thunderstorms, lightning, and hurricanes, look where Florida ranks, number 1 in each and every one of those. So certainly weather safety and preparedness is so very important in Florida, but it is all across the country. But because of our ranking in all those areas, there's been a little bit of humor out there. And of course, this was a cartoon that came out years ago saying, enough is enough. Let's move the whole state up to the northwest by Montana. Well, I've been to Montana and Wyoming and Yellowstone, and it's a beautiful place to be. But I don't know about the winters. I grew up with it in Chicago, but I think I'm most happy here in South Florida. So no matter where you live, you want to know what is your hazard that you need to prepare for, and we're going to address that in different ways. And look at this stat on rip currents, how rip currents over the last 10 years have killed more people than tornadoes or hurricanes. So if you live in a coastal community, it's so very, very important for people to understand what a rip current is, but most importantly, how to get out of a rip current if they're caught in one, and how you do not want to swim against it. You want to swim either along parallel to the beach to get out of it. This can really be a life-saving bit of information, how to get out of a rip current. Okay, and of course here in South Florida, we focus on hurricanes, and hurricanes are just a natural process for the planet Earth. Here in the Northern Hemisphere and during the summer season, we heat up. And so it's a way for the Earth to release that heat energy. And bottom line, it transports that heat from the lower latitudes near the equator to the higher latitudes. So it certainly is just a natural process. In terms of long range and climate change, lots have been talked about that. And just kind of a little summary slide here of what the consensus is of the research. And hurricanes will be wetter, slower moving, and we'll see more rapid intensification. And because of changing patterns, because of the warm ocean temperatures, more moisture in the atmosphere. And then the last point I have at the bottom, sea level rise. And with sea level rise, we're now going to see that ability of storm surge from a hurricane move even farther inland than it does today. And here in South Florida, our big storm, which really changed everything, and that was Hurricane Andrew, a Category 5 storm that hit in 1992. And when we look at the legacy of Andrew and what it did down here in Florida, well, it certainly woke up to Florida that we are the hurricane capital of the country. And so preparedness improved, emergency management improved. We here at the International Hurricane Research Center, we were created because of Andrew to be a place to do hurricane research. The Wall of Wind program was created, which we're going to talk about here in just a moment. And of course, stronger building codes. Florida now has the strongest building codes in the nation. And that's the message we're trying to get out across the country. And to stop this spin cycle of damage from a natural hazard, rebuild, damage, rebuild, we can't rebuild the same way. We have to build stronger and wiser. And where we're going to build, we need to now really look at how a natural hazard will affect it. So all the research we do here at FIU has to do with storm surge modeling, insurance modeling. And of course, there's a picture of the Wall of Wind. I've got the picture of the Wall of Wind behind me. 12 giant fans where we can create Category 5 hurricane conditions to test structures against, the resilience of strong hurricanes. So we'll be seeing that in just a moment. We get lots of different funding from grants. And I did want to mention this one. We do a lot of science and research, of course, but we got a grant now from the Mellon Foundation. And now to look at how socially now, all of us, this is all about people and how storms affect communities. So we have a ongoing grant where we're working with about 8 underserved communities here in Miami-Dade County, and how can we have them be better prepared for the next storm? We want all of us to be ready, and every community is a little different on how it's able to do so. We are also a Weather Ready Nation ambassador, and so I would encourage all of you to look this up. It's free. Go to the NOAA website, Weather Ready Nation Ambassador Program. You can become a Weather Ready Nation if you're doing things like education and outreach and on this kind of weather safety information. All right, and if you go to our homepage of our website, the Extreme Events Institute, you'll see what's called the hazard risk equation. So the right-hand side is H, E, X, and V, that's hazard, and then exposures, how much building and people's in harm's way, and then vulnerabilities. How well is that community prepared to handle a natural hazard? And then the left-hand side, EM, DR, and CAT. EM, emergency, D, disaster, CAT, catastrophe. So the end result is the left-hand side, and that is determined by not only the hazard, but the exposures and vulnerabilities. So a quick question. Are there natural disasters occurring around the world? And of course, all of us would think the natural answer would be yes, but my answer is no. And why would I say no? Well, here's the answer. The top 2 lines. There are no natural disasters. There are only natural hazards. Number 1, natural hazards occur all the time, but they only become disasters when they collide with our human, physical, and economic systems. We have built our towns and cities where natural hazards occur. So the term puts too much blame on nature, not enough on where and how we've built our communities. And we've created our own exposures and vulnerabilities. Now, I know we all say the term natural disasters, but I said all of this to make a point. So when you look at statistics, Florida and population, we are the 3rd most populous state in the country. Which state ranks number 1 for hurricanes? Well, we're number 1 for hurricanes. So now, if you put the 2 together, we are number 1 in hurricanes and we are the third most populous state in the country. Is that a collision waiting to happen? And the answer is yes. And Florida continues to grow every year. So let's take some examples using that equation. H, Hurricane Irma, which hit the Florida Keys and then parts of South Florida, Southwest Florida. And if we look at the V, vulnerability, for us, it's all about building code. And this is an example of what happened in the Florida Keys. The building in the center was built 2014. The buildings on either side built in the 1980s. So it shows that building codes do work. Here's another example. Hurricane Michael, which hit up in the Florida Panhandle as a Category 5, and a similar picture. You see the building in the center built in 2017, and the buildings on either side built in the 1980s. So building codes do work. They stop that spin cycle of the enormous costs to a landfalling hurricane. So this is something that needs to change nationwide. All right, so what about this hurricane season? So in August, NOAA bumped up the numbers. And why did they do that? Well, so some things going on. And this picture shows two things in particular. On the lower left part of the graphic here, you see El Nino. That's in the Pacific Ocean. That's when the waters in the Pacific are warming up above average. But on the other side, see where it says warm water over the Atlantic. We are seeing record sea surface water temperatures. So I've titled this graphic, The Tug of War. And initially, scientists were thinking El Nino was going to be the predominant feature. So that would tend to lower the number of storms. However, with the warm water in the Atlantic, that tends to increase the number of storms. So as of August, the warm water in the Atlantic was winning that tug of war. So that's why they bumped up the numbers, and we've been so active, even with an El Nino in place. We're all hoping that this fall El Nino would start to win, but it hadn't happened. Here's our names, and we've already gotten through. I had Philippe on my graphic here. We now have Rena. So look how many names we've had, and we only have 4 names left before we run out of names. We're hoping we don't have any more storms, but it certainly has been active. And it's not over yet in terms of, for all of us and everyone on this webinar that lives in a coastal hurricane zone, we have to get through September, and then October can still be very, very active until it officially ends in November 30th. So where are they going to go? Well, it's all about steering currents. And we've been blessed so far because a lot of these storms have been doing the big hook, the big curve. And that has really been fortunate. And we're hoping that this pattern of these storms curving and missing the coastline will continue. We don't know yet. It changes week to week, but it's been a good pattern up to this point. And when there is a storm out there, we start to see all the weathercasters show then during their weathercast the forecast cone. Unfortunately, the forecast cone is not understood by everyone. It gets misinterpreted. And so what does it show us, and what is it trying to tell us? Well, essentially, the cone is created by all of these hurricane track models. You may have heard the phrase spaghetti models. And so we wish there was one model that could accurately predict the track of a storm, but we're not there yet. We've improved. So the only thing the National Hurricane Center can do is encircle all those tracks and create the cone. And so, but what the cone shows us is geography, but in those areas in red on this example from Irma are hurricane warning areas, but it doesn't show us the hazards. And the National Hurricane Center is stressing for all of us to look beyond the cone and go to their website and look at these different graphics showing you the watches and warnings, but storm surge, what the predictions for storm surge inundation will be, heavy rainfall, so on and so forth. And that's what we need to focus on, are the hazards. And here in South Florida, we turn to our local office of the National Weather Service here in Miami, which is actually located right on our campus with the National Hurricane Center. But for all of you, no matter what community you're in, whether it be Chicago or New Orleans or wherever you may be, make sure you have on your browser your local office of the National Weather Service to get local information. Media will be providing it, but you want to become friends and become acquainted with your local office of the National Weather Service. And for example, our office will show very specific graphics on how that weather hazard will affect our community. So they'll do the same for you as well. All right, when it comes to research, I always ask the kids, does anyone fly into hurricanes? Why would you do that? Well, because we need the data. And of course, we've all heard of the hurricane hunters. And NOAA has hurricane hunters. This is their aircraft. You can see this G4 jet that flies up high above and out ahead of storms. And then there's a P3 aircraft that they fly into the storms. They have a couple of P3s that fly into the storm. And then besides NOAA, we have the Air Force Reserve pilots. We have about a dozen C-130s that also fly into the hurricanes. And let me tell you, these flights are incredibly dangerous, incredibly turbulent, and we thank the men and women who fly into the storms. And they volunteer their service. They're no one's forced to fly into a hurricane. So bless their hearts, they fly into these storms to get the data so we can get the information to our computer models. And this is their target, the eye of the storm. They fly in at about 10,000 feet and it's extremely turbulent. And when they bust into the eye, it's amazing what they see. The stadium effect, it's called, when you see the eye wall all around you. Here's another incredible picture. It's clear, it's sunny, it's calm, yet surrounded by some of the most dangerous weather on the planet Earth, the eye wall of a hurricane. And when they're flying through the storm and they get to the eye, they're dropping these instrument packages called dropsondes, which then collect all that weather data of humidity and temperature, wind speed and pressure, because we need to know the low pressure of the storm, where it's located, and all of that data then gets put into our computer models, and that brings us back to the cone and how the cone is created. And in terms of education outreach, every year in May, the hurricane hunters and the National Hurricane Center go on a hurricane awareness tour. So they go 5 cities in 5 days. So check with your local National Weather Service office if you live in a hurricane zone and find out if the hurricane awareness tour will be coming to your community each and every May. And of course, that's a picture of me with the kids as I've traveled with the hurricane awareness tour and talk about all our hurricane research in the Wall of Wind. All right, so when it comes to terminology, what's the difference between a hurricane watch and hurricane warning? And this can get confusing, even for folks up north. What's the difference between a tornado watch and tornado warning? What's the difference between a winter storm watch and a winter storm warning? And just kind of reminding people what the difference is. And of course, with hurricanes, with a watch, we're expecting hurricane conditions in 48 hours or in 48 hours. And the hurricane warning, we're expecting conditions definitely within 36 hours. So the weapons of a hurricane. And with a storm moving onshore, certainly there's inland flooding, there's storm surge flooding, there's strong winds, there can be tornadoes, rip currents at the coast. And so all these things we need to prepare for. And when it comes to the size of a hurricane, we all know there's 5 categories, with 5 certainly being the strongest. But the National Hurricane Center did some studies and realized how are people getting, where are the fatalities coming from? And they saw that storm surge is 49%, rain is 27%. So really this is telling us most people are getting into trouble and dying from the water, not from the wind. We can't ignore the wind, but we need to respect the danger of the floodwaters and storm surge. And this is an example picture of what storm surge would look like along a coastline. So the National Hurricane Center came out with new terminology a few years ago called storm surge watch and storm surge warning. And the public is still learning this new terminology and realizing that when this is issued for your coastline, it's very, very serious and life-threatening. And of course, that leads to tremendous amount of evacuations. People have to get out of the way of that storm surge. So people along the coastlines and hurricane zones need to know their hurricane evacuation zones. Where do they live? And if they live in an evacuation zone, have a plan and know where you're going to go if you have to evacuate. So case in point, this is Hurricane Ian from last year in Southwest Florida and Fort Myers Beach. And it came in as a huge storm. It brought wind, but it brought a tremendous amount of storm surge as well. But there is a question, why did so many people not evacuate Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel Island? Well, that's a big question, and it's a good question with every landfalling storm. So right now, there's lots of ongoing social science research to figure out what motivates people to leave or not leave. Human behavior issues, communications, how can the message be presented better to get people to respond? All that is ongoing and still a big challenge. And of course, there is the big campaign by the National Weather Service when turn around, don't drown. If there's flooded areas, don't drive through flooded streets. You don't know how deep the water is. And flood insurance. If a family can afford it in their budget, they should consider flood insurance. A flood can happen anywhere in the country. And it's not part of a homeowner's policy. Everyone should talk to their insurance agent. And even if it's not required by FEMA where you live, you still may want to consider getting flood insurance, but have that conversation with your insurance agent. And when it comes to injuries and fatalities, over the past 10 years, there's been nearly as many people who've died of direct deaths as indirect deaths. So how are people hurting themselves or dying? Many times it's after the storm. So here are the health issues that we're talking about. Traffic accidents, cleanup accidents, people getting on a roof. They're not a roofer. They fall off their roof or their ladders. Carbon monoxide poisoning from portable generators, lack of medical care, no electricity, people with special needs, maybe they don't have oxygen, very serious conditions, heat-related deaths, cardiac-related heart attacks, and so on and so forth. So these are the areas that we have to pay close attention to when it comes to any natural hazard coming into a community. And the campaign still continues. Never run a generator inside a home because of that deadly carbon monoxide gas. You would think that's common sense too, but we're still finding people that sometimes run the generator inside their living room and then they go to bed and they never wake up again. Just tragic, sad stories. So, and I always tell the kids, if the power goes out at night, how are you going to see at night? Sometimes the kids say candles, but sometimes they say flashlights. And I say, yes, flashlights are better than candles because candles can cause a house fire, which happens every time we lose our power. All right, the Wall of Wind, switching to our research and what we do with the Wall of Wind. Again, it's an amazing facility where we can create Category 5 hurricane conditions all for research. And here is a short video that'll give you an overview of the Wall of Wind.
Erik, I want to make sure that we can hear the volume.
NHERI Wall of Wind at Florida International University is an NSF-funded facility that enables researchers to better understand wind effects on civil infrastructure systems in order to prevent wind hazards from becoming community disasters. The NHERI WOW experimental facility is powered by a combined 12-fan system capable of repeatable testing and up to 157 mile-per-hour wind speeds. One advantage of the facility is the multi-scale and high Reynolds number simulation using 12 fans and a water spray system, which demonstrates the effects of wind and wind-driven rain. The 16,000 square foot fenced-off secure area enables researchers to plan and perform destructive tests for up to Category 5 hurricane wind speeds. Using a wide range of equipment, instrumentation, and experimental simulation protocols, the distinguished group of faculty, staff, and the well-trained team of technical and operations personnel are ready to support your world-class research. The Wall of Wind offers the following testing: high-speed holistic testing with simulated wind speeds, including Category 5 hurricane, destructive tests to study failure modes, wind-driven rain simulation to study water intrusion, full and large-scale aerodynamic aeroelastic testing and atmospheric boundary layer flows, extreme environment testing to develop innovative mitigation devices, and conventional boundary layer wind tunnel testing. If you are interested in learning more about the resources at the NHERI FIU Wall of Wind Experimental Facility and how they can support your research, contact Arindam Chowdhury.
All right, so that's an overview. And now this next video, there's no volume, so I'll just go ahead and start it and I'll talk over it for you. We had a media team come. We get a tremendous amount of media that comes to visit the Wall of Wind. And they wanted to see something very dramatic, a structure that would just blow apart. So they wanted to see a little bit of Hollywood. So we said, okay, we get that, but we want a teachable moment. So our engineers came up with this very unique structure, which you're going to see here now. Here we're getting things ready, putting the bicycle and the grill in front of the front door. Half this side was called the strong side that had metal shutters and roof tie downs to hold down that roof. The other side was the weak side, had no metal shutters or no roof tie downs. So what we did in this demonstration was we hit the strong side first up to Category 5 wind speeds, and basically nothing happened. But then we spun it around on our turntable, and we then hit the weak side with those winds, and watch what happened. Catastrophic failure. Huge difference. Watch that roof. Unbelievable. Flying debris becomes so very, very dangerous when a major landfalling hurricane or even a tornado coming through an area as well. So it taught us that mitigation works, in that just simple techniques as the shutters and the roof tie downs then prevented the building from being destroyed, as opposed to that weak side. So it was a demonstration that they got their Hollywood moment, but we also got our teachable moment as well. So as part of outreach, we thought, hey, why don't we take the Wall of Wind into the community and show everyone what we do? And so this is an exhibit at our local science museum, Museum of Discovery and Science in Fort Lauderdale, where it's now a teachable tool for moms and dads and kids to learn about wind engineering and what the Wall of Wind does. So it's another idea for all of you to get to know your local science museum and form partnerships. So all of this has to do, we've learned in wind engineering, positive and negative forces working on a structure, and roof design. There's gable, hip, and flat. And we've learned that a hip roof is the most aerodynamic. It slopes on all four sides. So all new homes built in hurricane zones, but down here in Florida, are built with a hip roof. And today we go to Category 5 with 157 miles per hour. We also have a new vision that we're started. It's a brand new Wall of Wind, if you will, that's going to go to 200 miles an hour. And we're also going to include a big wave tank so we can replicate storm surge along with the wind. Stay tuned. We'll keep you posted on the development of that project. So as I mentioned, here on our campus is the National Hurricane Center, National Weather Service. And I always ask, do you notice what material was used to build their structure? It's concrete. They can't blow away during a storm. So we're not saying all of our homes need to be built of concrete, but we need to build better, and that is all about wind mitigation. Every dollar we spend on mitigation saves at least $6. And now recent research shows it's $10 to $11 in damage and cleanup. This is a famous picture of a home that was built Code Plus in Southeast Texas. FEMA came to our Wall of Wind last year and announced a new national building code initiative across the entire nation. And so that's what needs to be done. If you go to this website, this is the Institute of Building and Home Safety, you can see where your state ranks when it comes to building codes. And you can see in Florida, we have a high ranking in green, and we are the strongest. And it's because of things like this. If we go into our attics, we see these hurricane straps that hold a roof down. This can be done in Illinois. This can be done wherever there's strong winds from strong storms. It's very cheap. It holds the roof to the wall, and then you anchor everything to the slab. Garage doors can be stronger. We learned that in Hurricane Andrew. This is my garage door in my home here in Broward County. So you just reinforce the door because that's a huge opening. If that goes, that can stress the roof. Flying debris. We need to protect our windows. You can do it by metal shutters or plywood. Metal is stronger, of course. Plywood is very labor intensive. And something we're still preaching, do not use tape. Tape does nothing. Still educational effort going to make sure people don't waste their time. And we know to protect our windows, but before a storm makes landfall, close all those interior doors of your closets and bathrooms and so on. And then go to that safe room and then stay there until the storm passes. So all of us, no matter where we live in the United States, we can get a home wind inspection to see what it is we can do to strengthen our own home. Here in Florida, we have a program called My Safe Florida Home, where the state of Florida is offering grant money to strengthen all our homes. Another nationwide program called Fortified Roof. Go to that program, and if you're going to replace the roof in your business or home, you can make it stronger and check out that program. All of us need to have a hurricane plan or a tornado plan or a winter safety plan. So family, home, businesses, even libraries, and seniors and special needs have to even have a better plan. But cancers of preparedness are complacency, apathy, amnesia, finances, and so on. We need to fight that. So do you know when your hurricane plan activates at your library or whatever your severe weather plan is at your library? And plans can be split up in different ways. With hurricanes, we have 5-day cones. So we can split up our list into 5 days. That's one way to approach our planning. And then after landfall, after any event, communication, no power, returning to work, homeless staff, all of these issues need to be addressed. So everyone should have a natural hazard plan in place to cover all of these things before, during, and after an event. And especially when it comes to HR, can they pay employees after a storm? How will you communicate with employees after a storm? And have you reviewed vendor contracts and so on? And all of us know that we need to be ready with all our survival kit items if a storm should come our way. So as I finish up, I do want to stress the importance of emergency management. Get to know your local emergency management, learn what they do, learn what their emergency operations center does. It starts with FEMA, but it goes from the state to the county to the city, and they are there to be a partner with you with all of this kind of education. And they have great websites with all of this information. So go to your local county emergency management to find this kind of severe weather information for your area. And they also do in a volunteer program called CERT, Community Emergency Response Team, where you train now local citizens in local neighborhoods to do basic first aid, search and rescue, because they can be part of the team after an event. All of these resources will be shared with you. I did a series of education modules for teachers that teach weather and emergency management. And my suggestions for all of you, and then we can talk about partnerships. It's all about partnerships, right? And with this kind of content, contact your local Office of National Weather Service. They're more than happy to work with you on programs. Your local Office of Emergency Management. Do you have a local resilience office? That's been happening all across the country. They can do things with you. Your local university or your local TV meteorologist. Call the TV stations, and many of them give talks. And your local science museum. They can do programs with you as well. And so ideas for programs, you can do CERT training at the library. You can do a hurricane or tornado seminar. You can do winter storm safety, heat safety, or maybe even a little vendor expo. And as far as resources, I do want to mention this is a very unique library in Homestead, Florida, south of Miami. It's called the Cybrarium. Check it out. Apparently there is now an evolution of libraries across the country where they're reinventing themselves and they're breaking the mold of traditional learning and bringing in cutting edge technology. So explore this Cybrarium and see what they do, and maybe that's something you can do. Here's another resource. We worked with the National Hurricane Center. It's a Spanish language hurricane website called huracanes.fiu.edu, a great resource for hurricane information in Spanish. And this is a 12-part series that I put together with the Museum of Science and Industry, or Discovery and Science in Fort Lauderdale. It's free. It's a great resource. All of these topics are covered in these really fun and unique videos. And they're all nicely laid out for you when you go check them out. Okay, so that finishes my presentation. And I'm now open at this point to address any questions or comments.
Erik, thank you so much for that amazing presentation. You are an expert in this field. I'm going to ask for Erica Lake. Are there any amazing questions in the chat?
Well, we did have one, and Erik, this person asked that this might be getting too far into the details, but is there more tornadic activity associated with hurricanes? And if so, does that change structural design needs?
Well, it's a great question, and thank you. So first of all, a landfalling hurricane, many times as it makes landfall, there's a part of the storm, the leading edge of the spiral bands, that can produce tornadoes. So many times a local coastline will be under hurricane warning and under a tornado watch. So we haven't seen an increase of tornadoes in recent years with hurricanes, but we know they do occur. So as it moves on shore, it brings in the topic of hurricanes and tornadoes. The mitigation information I presented, building codes, those simple techniques of hurricane straps, anchoring a home to its slab, it could save damage in millions of dollars, not only where hurricanes hit, but where tornadoes hit. So this message of enhancing building codes across the country, near Oklahoma City, they've started to do that. They're the tornado capital of the country. So they are now starting to move forward with getting better building codes for tornado damage, and it can certainly help. So it's this kind of mitigation message can help with either one of those hazards.
And that's all the questions that we had come in while you were speaking, Erik. We did just have one other comment that on Guam and Saipan, there are many homes built with concrete because of the typhoons.
And that's absolutely correct. Certain countries around the world that get hurricanes or typhoons, they're the same thing. It's just they're another part of the world. They call them typhoons. They've learned concrete can be very resilient. Many of the Caribbean nations in the Caribbean use a lot more concrete than a lot of our homes here in the United States. So it does come down to budget and cost and materials, but there's been this long tradition of building stick homes in the United States because forests in wood was so plentiful in the 1800s into the 1900s. That's the material we used, but it's not so resilient to strong winds. So, but yes, concrete structures certainly will be more resilient to, strong wind events.
Well, I think that is it. Wow, Erik, I am pumped. You are energetic about this topic area. I think this was so exciting to close out the webinar. I see there are claps across the board. People are excited about this information, so we appreciate you providing resources, and we are able to provide your presentation with others. There's thank yous for an excellent presentation. Wonderful. Lots of congratulations and positive feedback. I am so appreciative, Erik. Any other last minute questions? We've got great ideas, links. Oh, there's a question I'll grab this question is, can the general public visit the Wall of Wind?
We do tours of the Wall of Wind. It depends a lot with schools. We do it with professional organizations. We have a lot of VIP visits. So it's a matter of contacting me. I'm the person that does all the tours of the Wall of Wind. There can be a way to come see the Wall of Wind in conjunction with another group that may be coming in. We do it with a lot of students and so on and so forth. It's a very busy research facility, but we do the best we can with that.
Well, wonderful. Plus, I'm glad you offer us, this audience, the VIP treatment with connecting with you directly, Erik, for access to the Wall of Wind. Any other last questions? Lots of excellent presentation. Thank you to Frank Fajardo, who is in the audience, who connected us with Erik. Erik, I'm thrilled. This was such a great, we have had 6 excellent webinars during September, starting September 12th today, ending September 28th for the theme of preparedness for this month. I will be closing us out right now, which we will include the evaluation link. So just a many thanks to you, Erik, for your presentation, and thank you to everyone for attending today's sessions and all of the other sessions we've had during this forum. The link for the class evaluations on the slide, which we're not showing right now, but we will share it in the chat. And we found it works best to copy and paste it into a browser rather than directly clicking on this link. There is just a reminder for everyone that you will receive an email from us in about a week with a link to the recording. Lastly, we encourage you to check out the newly updated NNLM Emergency and Disaster Resources Guide, which serves as an online collection of resources and tools relevant to disaster and emergency management. Thank you again to everyone. Thank you, Erik, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the network of the National Library of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel, or select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.